Here we go again. Tools in the Shed, greatest hits holiday compilation series. This time it's your feedback. The stuff that got us chatting, your input into the conversations that we'd had. I hope you enjoy it.
But first of all, we have had some feedback, which is always terrific.
Great.
Vic P says, cars we lost in 2019, how about entry-level variant, base model of the Mazda 2 and Mazda 3? Little wonder Kia had a stellar 2019 in a shrinking market.
Yes.
So that's an interesting observation.
So technically Mazda
Poignant.
still has an entry-level model. It's just more expensive and named differently now. So I do take the point, but
Right.
it hasn't worked wonders for their sales in the
No.
3 last year.
All right, so then Philip Chadwick says, happy new podcast, guys.
Oh, thank you.
It's been like lost in the wilderness waiting for the new one since the last of 2019.
Clearly, next year we just need to podcast.
He
on
says,
Christmas
so
Day.
good to have them back.
How good is that?
Philip?
Positive feedback. I
Fair
love it.
checks in the mail. That is fantastic.
Thanks, Dad.
Hammer Rocks, a wonderful
He's back.
regular, says, welcome back and happy new year, guys. Here's for an even better podcast in 2020. Thank you very much.
We'll do our best.
Light side. I think our companies should reduce the amount of selection when it comes to safety features. Example, Kia's Seltos having a $1,000 safety pack. I'm fine with trim, engine, screen size, colour, etc. as options, but I think he's saying is I'm not okay with safety being a pay extra thing.
Paying more for
I
the safety
agree.
features.
It's a bit
yeah.
like when Toyota, I think, used to package air conditioning or a sunroof with ABS back in the 90s.
Or was it Hyundai or Toyota? I can't remember, but one of them.
One of
certainly,
them.
It was just a commodity. It had no special significance.
Yeah,
It's
and just
something
when you
pay-
thought
I
we
know-
were through the woods and we had ABS standard, no.
I thought the
Done it
history
again.
there, just to go off track for a second, I thought the history was there that they realised pretty quickly that nobody would pay for safety equipment, but they wanted to give it to people. So the only way they could get people to tick the option box was to pair it with a better stereo
is that the
or
rationale?
something. I
Maybe.
think that was
Right.
the reasoning behind
Okay.
it at the time.
Perhaps, but nonetheless, they were charging more for
Yes,
safety.
exactly.
Yeah.
As you were saying that, Mal's eyes were narrowing. I think I'm not sure he's in agreement
That
with
sounds
you.
like a PR answer, Chester. Oh, thank goodness I got my sunroof.
All right, Triple Beam Miracle Dream says 2020, the year we care more about a Yaris than a Lambo. And
Yes.
in response, Drust 999 says, well, I guess more people will be able to afford a Yaris over a Lambo. LOL.
LOL.
And then Triple Beam Miracle Dream says, nah, that new baby Lambo is cheap and looks cheap. I don't know which baby Lambo
I don't
he's
know what he
talking about.
means. A
Anyway,
cheap baby Lambo. I've
cheap
never heard
baby
of such
Lam-
a thing.
Bet it's not Yaris, GR Yaris cheap.
But, well, Yaris
how,
or
but how-
Urus.
how cheap is GR Yaris cheap going to be?
Urus.
That's the question.
Well, this is in the context of a Lamborghini, of course.
But for
Yeah,
me,
so-
I got to tell you, every year has been more excited about a Yaris year than, or a hot hatch year than
But
a Lambo year.
mate,
every
as you
year.
know better than most, the buzz around that Yaris GR has been immense,
And,
globally.
and deserving. It
Yeah.
is a really
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, onwards and upwards.
Yeah,
GR.
for Toyota, how exciting.
Now,
Gazoo
Hammer
ahoy.
Rocks came back for a second go and said, your thoughts on the Ford Ranger Raptor V8. This is where you can come in, Chester.
okay, sure.
Do you think it is real? And do you think there is a market for a Ranger Raptor V8 coming upwards of 140K, if reports are to be believed? Costing more than V8 powered full-size trucks like the Ram and some that are about to come here, fingers crossed, F-150, Tundra, Titan, all of those.
Yes.
So as far as your intel goes, you're pretty certain that it is real, yeah?
Yeah, so look, I'm certain that the project is real. I'm just not as certain that it's going to be as quick as some other reports have suggested. So,
As in to launch or an acceleration?
as into launch. So initially the mail was that it was going to come next year,
Yep.
pre the facelifted Ranger arriving in 21. But having now spoken to just about everybody who could possibly be involved in the project and plenty who couldn't, it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. My mail is that it is happening.
Yes.
But it's happening a little slower than people realise.
You also got a whiff of some potential other power plants, didn't you? Like,
Yeah, there's still talk of a turbocharged V6 petrol engine, which you might remember one was spotted here in Australia, I think at the beginning of last year, maybe, doing
Okay.
some testing. Now,
Okay.
the word was at the time that was for the US market.
Yep.
but that would be an easier fit if it was going to be a global play.
As long as it suits right-hand drive.
Yeah, or and of course the V8 as well. But where that price came from, that $140,000 price, obviously that's not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination. That's just one of the engineers giving us a little bit of feedback.
Yeah.
But the point they were making was that it is a very complicated job.
I bet.
A lot of people think you can just pull an engine out and put another engine in. That's really just not how it works.
Because that's the conversation we had around the Gladiator as well. You know, why can't we just put a V8 in it?
Yeah.
And you can, but then you can't make it safe
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
make it do all the things that it
it
needs
will
to do.
fit.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's
Make
just
sure
the beginning.
it's worth warranting for 5 years, etc., etc.
Yep.
But the other thing we need to consider is that, yes, it might fit, etc., etc., but we're approaching very quickly, well, maybe not that quickly, but we're heading towards the next Ranger being shared.
Yep. And I think
With
you
the
made that
Amarok,
point, didn't you,
yeah.
Chester?
Which
that that's when it
opens
may
up
happen.
so many
Exactly, yeah.
other opportunities.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
diesel
You
V6.
but you design it in. And
Yeah.
That's my thinking at the
when-
moment is next gen.
When the Raptor arrived, my lizard brain went straight to, it's got to have a V8.
Yeah.
You know, to be special in that way,
yeah.
it's that kind of vehicle.
Yeah.
It just makes instinctive kind of sense for
It does.
mine.
But also, to answer that other question of how much is too much, that window of how much is too much has been completely rearranged for me over the last 24 months with people paying 100, 120, 130, 140 for new trucks. So how much is too much? Lord only knows. People are happy to pay
and
it.
that's only considering the MSRP at the showroom, the
Yep.
showroom floor. Have a gander at all the ones with subframe extensions that are sitting 6 inches higher
Yeah,
than
that's
stock.
right.
And
Yes.
that costs thousands of dollars.
So the aftermarket
tyres,
spend is
the
immense,
body,
yes.
the colour coding,
Yeah.
you name it.
And then it opens up a kind of fundamental flaw in the whole idea of going there and customizing the car ex factory, because the whole idea of customizing is to make it your own. So
personalise
you know
it,
that people
yeah.
love to go off and do it their own way. So the Raptor's been successful, mind you, but that aftermarket is always going to have a place when it comes to these vehicles.
absolutely.
One car we'll talk more about later, though, that will test that theory is the Intrek Warrior, the
Yep.
Navara Intrek Warrior,
Yeah.
which they've basically chosen the bits they changed on that car based on the common upgrades that people are making,
Yep.
common aftermarket upgrades.
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right.
I reckon they'll
but as
succeed.
JC points out, then you do end up in a position where your once original Ute
Yeah.
looks just like every other Ute.
Yeah,
that
that's
rolls off
right.
the street,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right.
And you want to change it again just to change it.
Now, so thank you very much to everyone for all of that
Yes,
feedback.
thank you.
And Chester. But first of all, we've had some feedback, which is great. And last time around, we were speaking about the Nissan Z, the much anticipated 400Z for Nissan and a new GTR. So Omar Monel came at us with a manifesto, or at least it's a list of demands. And he ended with this, but for context, I'll put it up the top. He says, yes, I'm in the US. So some of the models that he talks about are pertinent to the US market, maybe not so much elsewhere. He agrees with us that Nissan needs something lower than the new Z. He agrees that the IDX concepts would be perfect, those beautiful concept cars that Nissan did a few years ago. He also would call it Sylvia, and he says it should be a 2-litre manual, rear-wheel drive and lightweight. So basically that's a 180SX, 200SX Sylvia. He agrees that Nissan needs that, and it would be very timely. He says the 400ZX or 400Z is supposed to have the Infiniti Q50, Q60 engine, which is that 3-litre V6 VR30 TT. And the Infiniti Red Sport is at 400 horsepower out of the box. So that's just under 300 kilowatts. So you could have a Nissan Nismo edition, because it's very tunable. So you could be up to 450 horsepower, like 335 kilowatts in no time. So I think he's right. That would be the perfect engine. And that's the rumour, I think. Yeah.
But that car will live and die, I reckon, by what they do to the chassis. If it's just an engine in the old chassis that's been tweaked a little bit, it's not going to be a fabulous drive. But if they put a lot of work into how it actually steers, then it could be a thing of absolute beauty.
And they've got a great example of exactly what Chesto is concerned about in the Q50 Red Sport, in that it is a great engine, but it's never really had the chassis to support it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's still been a bit more of a luxury car than an outright performance machine.
But my hopes are high. I'm so excited about that car. I've said this before. My first ever car was a 260Z. So if that thing is a
You set
weapon, I'll
the
be in
bar
the queue.
high with your first car. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
They bought it for $5,000, wrote it off like every other P-plater has before me. Now,
Wrote it off.
now they're worth about 40. So
You're
anyway,
kidding.
that one got away from me.
I understand it wasn't Chesto's fault, though, in Chesto's
No, it was
defense.
not. No, someone hit
Okay.
me, actually. But
He
Now,
wasn't
don't
delivering
tell
pizzas
me
at the time.
it was an order.
no, God, no.
Ah.
And it was the
Good.
and
I
it was
thought
the
I'd got
two,
you.
not, the 2-seater, not the 2+2. The
Plus
2+2
two.
ruined the shape up there.
Oh, wow. What a shame that it came to an untimely end.
It
But
did.
Omar isn't finished. He wants a Pulsar GTIR to come back using the Versa Note body, which is a hatch, and a 2-litre turbo all-wheel drive. Fantastic. All power to him. Now, for Infinity, this is obviously relevant because he's in the States. Infinity is not a goer here in Australia anymore. But he wants the concept Roadster, which I think was called the Prototype 10. I did a bit of digging. It looks amazing. For people on YouTube, we'll have an image of that up for you to have a look at. With the Leaf electric powertrain as a flagship, loaded with tech and touchscreens, and the cars need a way better interior anyway. So he sees that as a bit of an icebreaker. And he loves the new steering wheels from Nissan. They're kind of retro, and he cites the Sentra. And I found an image of it, and again, people on YouTube will be able to have a look at it. And he's right, it does look like an old school, recognisably Nissan steering wheel.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
some interesting observations in Omar's manifesto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma.
On the same track, Neza said Nissan should also bring back the Fair Lady name. He says, something about smacking fools on the track with my Fair Lady tickles my funny bone. And then he came back with a follow-up comment to his own comment and said, scratch that and any other genius ideas I've ever had. All humanity needs is the Alfa Romeo Giulia GT-AM. We've peaked, boys. That's what he says. So he thinks that's as good as it's going to get.
So that's in two comments. We've seen people suggesting the official return of Sylvia and Fairlady.
Correct.
And the reason we never got Sylvia and Fairlady really in Australia or the US is because Nissan presumed it was a little bit sooky to name them, such in our markets. But
language, Mal. Language.
we all know them. We all know the backstory. The time is now to give us the proper names.
Can I side topic for just a moment? Don't these conversations just make you long for the good old days of the Japanese auto industry? So many great cars from that era,
I know. And look,
it's the 90s we're looking for, It's not necessarily the 60s.
No, that's right.
We'll get to that soon enough because there's some commentary very much in that vein. But the evocatively named R Soul says, with the biggest financial crash since the 1930s, due to a massive public health crisis, I wouldn't expect to see any newness in sports cars anytime soon, seeing as they weren't doing all that well prior to all this malarkey, to use his words. So it's an interesting point.
That is a great point, but you would have thought that when Volkswagen had its trouble a couple of years ago, that the likes of the Bugatti Chiron would be the first to fall. And guess what? We've got a Bugatti Chiron.
Yes, that's true.
The niche of all niches.
And
you never know.
All I'm reading at the moment, too, is that they're just waiting to cut the ribbon on the 400. The production on that would have started way before any of this malarkey.
Good point.
So, mate, that will still cruise through, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, Arsol says that he wouldn't be surprised to see a few car manufacturers go belly up in the near future. So,
with that, I agree with him.
Yeah. Now, John Schroeder calls out the GFC and the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan, of course, which hit Japanese manufacturers hard. But he says we're right. It was Richard that made the point in the last podcast that Nissan had Carlos the Ghost going, operating in the background. So John agrees. Creative bookkeeping with the management style of a god or guru that, goodness knows what was going on in the background. He says, where's the money, Carlos? Carlos, baby, does a legal shuffle and runs home to mum. So it's not to be discounted as a factor. And he says it'd be good to see Nissan back with a performance-style Z car and reaffirm the Nissan brand instead of the endless generic clones of SUVs which are duplicated by Renault. Remember being in Japan when Nissan, Nismo, cult cars were all over the place. And that put me in mind of going up to Japan in, I want to say it was about 1991, and going to the Fuji, it was a 500-kilometre touring car race at Mount Fuji. The car park, Fuji Speedway, was uniformly R32 GTRs
Yeah, awesome.
and 180 SXs. The whole place, that's what it was full of.
Yeah.
Those cars. So I totally take his point and agree.
Yeah, me too.
Nissan had something that it's lost and could easily regain.
Yeah.
Now,
And hopefully,
David Bird. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, hopefully they've learnt the lesson from the GFC, where Nissan during the GFC scaled right back, and we're still feeling repercussions of that. Whereas Mazda pushed ahead, invested heavily, and look at the Mazdas we've got now. So hopefully they take a leaf out of Mazda's book and don't do the same thing twice.
It's all those cliches, isn't it? You know, who dares wins. You've got to take a risk, and we'll see.
Gamble.
This will be quite a telling time.
Yeah.
David Burt says he's sorry, he apologises, but says the Nissan Toyota Halo models we featured last time are, all caps, ugly. With a multitude of angles and shapes. The Supra looks like it's been shunted up the rear by a 200 series on the M5 or the Monash. So that's quite an interesting comment. He says, in many respects, the Toyota 86 is a much purer execution of a two-door sports car than these two plastic fantastics. In a similar vein to the Datsun 240Z. So there's a lot of sentiment out there wanting that simplicity, Yeah.
I agree with him, JC, to be honest. I love the Supra. I don't think anybody's head over heels with the way that it looks, but it certainly drives very well. But I agree with the 86 was a really nicely styled car, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, you know, Tetsuya Tada was the engineer in charge of both those programs, the 86 and the Supra. So in terms of the way the cars were styled, there's a big difference there. So he obviously gave free rein to the people working in the broader team.
That's right.
All right.
Have we ever complained that the GTR isn't beautiful, though? Like, you know, the R34 even is probably the most celebrated of all GTRs.
Yeah.
It ain't a beautiful car.
It's not by any stretch.
Ugly, it's bluff.
Yeah. I've got to say, though, that 50th anniversary Ital design version of the GTR, I really like. I think it's an amazing looking thing. So, it can be made to look beautiful, but I suppose, you're right. Looks aren't everything.
But when you see that car, JC, the Ital design, it's so clear what they've done. It's like they've just taken a giant iron and ironed out all the creases. And it's like, okay, actually under all of that, it is quite a good looking car.
It's a logical direction for the GTR to take.
Yeah.
Well, they've just put it in the microwave on high for about 30 seconds, and all those hard edges have just kind of softened off a bit.
The plastics have returned to their original form.
Now, shifting subjects here. Previously, we also talked about Utes versus a van. Now, M4, Matt Campbell, who was in the podcast last week, we discussed the prospect of comparing Utes with one-box vans because as a working vehicle, you know, which has the better utility. And Stewie GB thinks the Ute versus van idea is brilliant. And for work, he has a Hilux for towing and generally, his words, not mine, looking flash, and a Hi-Ace for the actual on-site work. He says the van's got it all over the Ute for working out of, put a forced floor for ladders, etc. underneath,
100%.
and still have a shed load of space for everything else above. And he says, love your work. So that's what he
Even
does.
better. JC, if I was moving house... Sorry, Mel, you go.
I was just going to say, but at the same time, there's a whole heap of stuff you can fit in the infinite height capacity of a Ute that you can't fit in a van. So it comes down to the job you're doing.
The load height is quite generous in a Hi-Ace. It's infinite. You're right. But I suppose there's also the security of a one box that whatever's in it is in it. You're not risking anything falling off, flying off, all that kind of stuff as well.
And the weather protection, JC, as well.
Good point.
I've said this before, but when I'm moving house, it's van over Ute any day of the week.
Yeah.
Oh, God,
Yeah, too true. Well, look, I'm going to have a crack at this name and just watch me nail this. Andre Vogier, he loves the van and, in fact, calls out the Mitsubishi Delica 4x4, which has been a big grey import favourite over a period of time in Australia. But I did note that our friends at Go Auto a while ago noted that Mitsubishi Australia is studying the return of the current D5 version of the Delica. And if you look for people on YouTube behind us, we've got some pics of that car. So Mitsubishi Australia is saying, we're studying, having a look at it, might add it into the mix.
I think it would take the Triton and the ASX to have a big big whack in their sales charts for them to push go on the Delica. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Delica. So you're going the Delica, as in Celica, rather than Delica Celica.
I think that's how the enthusiasts pronounce it. It's a bit like the Nissan Stagia wagon, you know.
It has its
Stagia.
Stagia.
Like we'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on, it has enthusiasts? I'm staggered.
Chesto, get with the program. Get with
Just
the
about
Delica
everything
program.
has enthusiasts. And always remember, Mal's never met a car he doesn't like. So there's also TGV, the very fast train, has said, I prefer the SUV versions of the Utes. So he likes the Pajero Sport, Everest, Fortuna over the respective Triton, Ranger and Hilux. So if it comes down to a comparison in terms of what works best for him. That said, I really want the new 2020 Ford Explorer ST. Shame Ford won't make it in right-hand drive.
I've raised my hand for just a moment.
Yes.
With the wonders of Google, I've dug up a Japanese ad, and it is Delica.
Delica. Fair enough. Okay.
Delica.
I will adjust my pronunciation from this moment forward. Delica. Now, our New Zealand correspondent, Wax333, says, will we see the Nissan Titan in Australia and New Zealand? And that's been the $64,000 question for some time. Chesto, I think you've written some stuff most recently about the Titan. What's your mail on that?
It's coming. Lock it in. Well, look, it was coming before the corona craziness broke out. They were investigating. They're so keen on having that car in Australia. They were investigating right-hand drive factory production. If they can't get that, they were hedging their bets by investigating right-hand drive conversions in Australia because of the success of Ram and others. So they were champing at the bit for that vehicle. It was a lock. What's happened since coronavirus has come out and the havoc that's wreaked on car company finances, I don't know, but certainly a month ago it was a certainty.
And can I just add, they weren't simply just pondering it; they were actively pursuing this car for at least a few years before all this. So solid intentions to bring the car here.
But of course, there are now question marks over everything. So fingers crossed.
All right. Well, Wax also says that Nissan should renew the Primera based on the P11, which was a 1995 to 2002 car. But the reason might be that that car was assembled in Wiri, in the southern part of Auckland, in New Zealand, for some time. He says the styling would be cool to see, maybe a skyline for the masses.
Yeah.
And he also asked if there are any details on the new Subaru Levorg 1.8-litre turbo and power outputs, and our own Tom White did do a story for us on that. And he said they're all new, they're calling it lean burn 1.8-litre four-cylinder boxer. Nothing's confirmed, but he's saying maximum outputs are 147 kilowatts, 294 newton meters, with the ladder available quite low down because it's a turbo. But, you know, we'll see. Those things need to be confirmed over time. Now, under the subject of general commentary, Thunder 250 came in with First Viewer, which is an online must-do. Then he said, something I'd love to see are more cars similar to Imprezas and Evos of the 90s. There's just this nostalgia for cars of the 90s and early 2000s that have small capacity four-cylinder engines capable of pushing huge power with a few modifications, but still affordable for most people, similar to the current 86 BRZ. So there are a lot of people out there that just want more of that.
You know what we need to make that happen, though? We need rallying to take off again. You know, we've got Toyota with the GR efforts with the Yaris. The commenter before was asking for the return of the Pulsar GTIR. That car only existed for rallying.
Rally car.
WRX for rallying, Evo for rallying. Get behind rallying and the rest will follow.
Now, I reckon there's also an argument that the time is coming again for that just through circumstance. V8s are already on the out. V6s will be next. If you want a performance vehicle in the future, it likely will be a four-cylinder. And frankly, when you look at the GR Yaris's output with its 1.63, you can see what's actually possible with those engines. I mean, I just think that time's coming again naturally, to be honest.
Well, look, Teo Ryu made a good comment in response to Thunder 250. He said, I reckon Hyundai will bring all that stuff.
Yeah.
When you think about i30N, Kona N, Elantra N, on it goes. I think it's a Veloster, that kind of stuff may well come from Hyundai and a new source.
And don't forget that Toyota's going to GR everything from the Corolla to the CHR to arguably the Yaris and Corolla Cross. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of little performance cars coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure
now,
we'll see it in the same vein as we did in the 90s without homologation.
The rallying point is a really good one, Mel.
Okay.
Yeah, homologation drives that kind of innovation, doesn't it? Now, our old mate Hammer Rock says, I don't mean to brag, but I've been practicing social distancing, that is, avoiding people, way before COVID-19. Now, NZ Sarge 1 says, we were talking about coffee in cars and coffee makers in cars, and he or she says, Audi has an optional coffee maker on some of its SUVs. And I did a bit of digging here, and it's actually called the, believe it or not, hand presso. It's the hand presso. And for people on YouTube, there'll be some vision of it in the background. It's a little, 12-volt powered unit that sits in your cup holder. You pour the water in around the top, put a little coffee bag on the top, screw the top on, give it a press, and it spits out an espresso that you can have on the road. And Audi does a badged version as an option accessory for some of their cars.
Hopefully no one's doing it at 180 on the auto.
That's right.
I agree.
Yeah, that's right. And look, finally, Bartonez 123 has a dilemma. He says, I have a dilemma, window tint or no tint. My new car has no factory tint, but I'm actually somewhat enjoying that, finding the visibility at night. Superb. But anyone I've ever talked to has always gone directly for the tint. Am I the odd one out here? Should I be tinting? And I think it's a really good question. Now, as far as I'm aware, the benefits are that it cuts UV light, and that's for heat and fading or damage to the interior of the car. It can reduce glare, and it helps the AC, gives it a bit of a leg up because you're getting less heat into the car. Mm-hmm. All I would say to Bartonez 123 is if he does it, don't do it yourself. The number of times you've seen that back window. I know we can save a lot of money. I'll just do it myself. It'll be great. And then it's an absolute horror show. Everyone's seen it.
Always starts with that famous question, well, how hard could it be? The answer is very hard.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you can remember covering your books at school, covering glass is much harder.
Well, I mean, part of it's aesthetic as well, I suppose, if you like that kind of brooding, darker look around the windows on your cars. But it seems as though there's a lot of upside to it.
Can I add another detail? Once again, it comes down to the job you're doing with the car. But another key consideration is the comfort of any children on the back seat. Yeah. You put baby in there, they'll just cry. They don't tell you, oh, the sun's in my eyes. They just cry.
Yes.
And it's a good, cover-all. And you're also protecting their skin. You want, if you think about it, we should be lathering up in sunscreen every time we go for a drive.
Sure.
But if you've got a
or you could just turn around tint, and
it really helps.
Couldn't you just whack a pair of sunnies on kind of cut out the middleman?
I've tried that.
Didn't go well.
No. Didn't last long.
All right, well, we go on feedback from last week's episode.
Feedback.
And the guys were talking about the prospect, and it's very much a real prospect, of Hyundai Utes of different types. You're more light-duty, city-fied Santa Cruz type Hyundai Ute, and a bigger, beefier one for more traditional Ute type work, and similar from Kia. And we got a lot of feedback. And Wayne Zodiac, what a great name that is. That sounds like something out of a gumshoe detective novel. Says he's always wanted someone to build a small Ute like the Jumbuck. The Proton Jumbuck.
Yeah.
Budget Ute, low cost, 4-cylinder petrol, low running and servicing costs.
Yep.
Keep your diesels. They're no good for day-to-day urban driving because of issues like DPFs, the diesel particulate filters. If companies like MG can make an SUV for $15,900, I can't see why companies like Kia can't fill this market. And I am so with him. The Jumbuck and the Subaru Brumby, which I think the Brat in the US and some other markets. And funnily enough, in just thinking about this, I went off to the always reliable Wikipedia. And according to it, the Brumby was never sold in the domestic market in Japan. So private imports of these into Japan are a bit of a specialty. But there's got to be a market for something like that.
There was the little known Mahindra Dick Berry that did pretty well up in
that
Queensland.
had a terrible
that was
ride and a 3-speed manual only available.
Small volume import.
Very small. 0 to 112.9 seconds.
Grudland74 says, yes, definitely sign up for a Santa Cruz N line. Bring it here, it will sell. And we had our wheel love, which I presume means rear wheel love. He reckons it's mad that Kia and Hyundai aren't bringing a pickup truck to the USA, and they'd buy one for sure. So there you go. Once you start to open up the American market. Andrew Frankel said, visually needs to look tough and not polarizing. Mechanically, trumping Hilux is easy. Everyone else already does it. Controversial, very provocative statement.
I think
Alex.
that's one of the reasons why the BT50 might struggle, is that it looks a bit posh at the front.
Right. Well, it's car-like, isn't it? That's
very car-like.
That was my my sort of con about it, was that it does look very, very car-like.
And I remember, Crafty, when you were driving the X-Class, it wasn't posh enough. The interior wasn't.
The interior was shocking. Yeah, it was shocking. Yeah, bits were falling off.
I'm looking forward to the Tarkan, the Hyundai Tarkan, which is going to be coming out, which is going to be the Hilux rival, supposedly the name of it. I think that would keep Toyota executives awake at night.
Well, the last week I know the guys were talking about, look, Hyundai has a bit of a head start in that they've done such a good job in this market in Australia with the iLoad, setting up that commercial part of the brand that a Ute slips in there relatively easily. There's not as much ground to break in convincing people that the brand's ready to deliver that kind of vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah.
And look, you got i30, which has become, a household item basically in Australia, as well as a small hatch, and Santa Fe's massive too. I think they'll have no problem at all cracking that Ute market. It's not like it'll be like, what, a Hyundai Ute? It's going to be more like, finally it's here. So,
exactly. Why hasn't it happened ages ago? Good point. Raucous 919 or 919, maybe it's a Porsche 919. He just says, chop the back off the Sportage. And I reckon that's it. They just need to get out the gas axe, shape it around the back, and the job is done. And I would say also the Telluride, which is the big Kia SUV, it's got the underpinnings that you would think would do it. And possibly that's exactly what they're working on. But those two, I get you, Raucous.
We could ask our lovely listeners and viewers out there, what car would you utify? Or what SUV would you utify out there?
Good idea. That would be fun. Would be fun.
Sorrento.
Ghost. Yeah.
Ghost. Yes.
David Hall says, let's face it, Hyundai Kia in anything they do will be a force, and it could mean the end of Mazda and Nissan. So he's seeing automotive Armageddon here when these commercial vehicles start to arrive, which is a big call. But to your point, Richard, I suppose there will be some very big wigs in certain car companies looking over their shoulder once these light commercial Utes arrive.
Absolutely, Rams and F-150s and then you don't even get to Rivian. Rivian's going to be here in a couple of years' time, and that's going to make everybody review how they do a Ute too. So
that's true. That's true.
I'll put in my order for a Cybertruck too. So
Good.
I want to see. I want to see Crafty do the first review of a Cybertruck.
The three motor Cybertruck. So
yes,
fantastic. That'll go vertical.
Can you just Can you wrap yourself in alfoil, Crafty, when you do it?
Yes.
I just generally
down flower pot on your head.
I generally get around like that anyway, Richard. So it wouldn't be a problem. That's how I was dressed when I was in the boot. So
with the cat. Now, Marco VESS, and apologies, Marco, we've been calling you Marco Vess.
Oh, no, it's a Commodore reference.
He straightened us out and told us it's actually Marco VESS. He says, despite that, he says, love your work, as always, but this week's episode left him feeling depressed.
What?
With all the Ute talk. He says there's a VES V6 Ute in his modest fleet, and he has no interest in replacing it with any of the current ladder chassis leaf spring, drum brake, diesel smoke, Utes.
I
He says,
agree.
bring on the Ford Maverick, which is Ford's little Ute,
Yeah.
potentially based on the Bronco Sport, the little Bronco.
Yes.
Which looks great.
He says, thankfully, there are bright spots like the GR Yaris, and BRZ, and he's hopeful our electric future will bring some spark back. Oh, that's a great
Good one.
I see what he did there.
Nice.
to the new car market. So he's hopeful, yet just disappointed by what's on offer right now.
That's just my state of being 24 hours a day.
Most of the time.
Hopeful but disappointed.
Well, you're not alone. So thank you, Marco VESS, or we prefer Marco Vest. Now, and De Cook has finished us off with, if not for bloody GM, and I'd say points for use of the word bloody there, because I know De Cook, if he's not German, he's spent a lot of time in Germany. So well
Aussie
done.
already.
And welcome to
De Cook, eh?
Australia. And all folks wanting SUVs, if they kept Falcon and Commodore Utes alive for just a bit longer, they would have been ahead of the curve now.
There you
it is
go.
kind of ironic that we're talking about these lighter duty Utes.
Yes.
And Holden Ute and Falcon Ute were around for the longest time.
Long
He's
ago.
he's a genius, De Cook, eh? De Cook. Sorry.
Is he now De Cook, eh?
I've called him.
No, he always has been.
Is he French? Oh.
And
I always thought it was his DJ name. But it's
on the
De
wheels
Cook.
of steel. De
He,
Cook,
correct-
on the
he
wheels of
corrected
steel.
me, didn't he?
Wow.
That was it. Hope you enjoyed that. Remember, the tools will be back in the shed from January 15, 2021. Hope to see you and talk to you then.